to another edition of GMAT Club's GMAT Debriefs. My name is Evan, and for those of you who don't know me by that name, most of you should not. My forum name is Nightblade354. I'm hoping most of you do know that one. Today I'm joined by Lynn, and Lynn is not only a GMAT Club user, which we really appreciate, she is also a very high elite score on the GMAT, scoring a 720, which is truly incredible. And we're very fortunate to have her with us today, to have her break down what she did, her journey, and her experiences. So please give a warm GMAT Club welcome to Lynn. Lynn, welcome to your first chat.
Thank you, Evan. It's an honor to be here.
Now, I can't hear them cheering, and neither can you for that matter, but I assume that was a very raucous standing ovation. So you're very popular, I imagine. Before we dive into all of the questions, would you like to give a little intro about yourself just to give some of our users a better idea of who you are?
Sure. Well, I'm an industrial production graduate, engineer graduate, and I have worked in many different roles and in different industries. To give you a brief, I worked as a software engineer initially for IT services, and I worked in sales and marketing for 3D printing in Dubai. And currently, I'm an operations manager for a lighting components manufacturing industry. So that's a little bit about my background.
A lot of good experience, though. I'm sure that'll help you. And by the way, our sponsors are letting me know that I cannot forget to mention that we are doing an MBA Spotlight, the top 20 schools around the United States. Make sure to sign up for it. It's a great opportunity. There it is, live Q&A. It's a great opportunity to learn a little bit about some of these schools, to maybe have some of the directors and program directors maybe see your name, maybe see your face. So great opportunity to learn about those schools. Write it up in your essays about why you want to go to that school, and maybe, just maybe, it gets you in. All right, Lynn, are you ready for all the questions I have for you? It's a lot.
I am. Definitely. Let's get going.
Terrific. The first question I have for you is an age-old question. It's a question of why. Why did you want to take the GMAT? Why did you want to punish yourself?
That's a tricky question, actually. I think the end goal for anyone wanting to take the GMAT is getting into a B school. And it was the same for me when I started off, okay, I want to get into a B school. What's the first step? The first step was GMAT. And when I came across the GMAT, I thought this was a very different test compared to all the other exams you've ever taken, because this exam not only tests your math fundamentals, your grammar skills, but it's also going to test how you manage your stress, how are you managing your emotions, how are you going to, handle pressure, right? So there were so many aspects that this test was testing. So I think the B school goal kind of got in the backseat, and it was more about the GMAT, how the GMAT is, cracking the GMAT is going to develop me holistically as a person, professionally and personally as well. So I think that was kind of something I found very amusing about the GMAT. So yeah, the reason for the GMAT was B school, but I think it was also that it would just help me overall as a person and, professionally as well.
Wow, that is a great answer.
Thank you.
So it sounds like GMAT Club wasn't your first stop then.
It was, when I first decided to take the GMAT, I was like, okay, what do I do? First thing was, I think, buying the official guides. And next was like, okay, I'm kind of helpless. I don't know what to do. Where am I head next? And I got on GMAT Club, and I got a few study buddies that were very helpful, that kind of put me on my path, so to speak. So I think GMAT Club was definitely the best forum for anyone, any GMAT aspirant, so to speak.
That's awesome. Thank you for the shout out. We appreciate that. I swear we're not paying her, for those of you watching. So now take me into the mindset a little bit. You've discovered GMAT Club, the greatest place on earth. You've started to look at other schools. You've started to understand why you need to take the GMAT. Tell me a little bit about your mindset in terms of the goals you were setting for yourself, not only from a score perspective, but also on a time perspective. Were you hoping to get an 800 in a day? or were you hoping to maybe get a 700 in a 3 to 6 month window?
Well, I think that was my first mistake, setting unrealistic goals for myself. I decided, when I thought, okay, I'm going to take the GMAT in 3 months, I'm going to just cross that 720 mark. Actually, my goal was 720 or 730. And I did not know what my baseline was. I didn't know where I was starting from, how weak I was, because it had been years since I'd done my engineering. They say Indian engineers easily start scoring really well in quant. That wasn't the case with me because I'd completely forgotten my fundamentals. So I can say that the biggest problem was setting unrealistic goals for me. I should have been a little more careful about that. I wasted a lot of time just doing that, stressing myself, I'm going to get it done quickly. 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. It was not happening. The reason was I was putting so much pressure on myself. I wasn't seeing, am I making any progress? Why am I not making any progress? I wasn't doing any of that. I was only looking at the end goal of getting that 700 plus without doing all this. So I would definitely say, when someone is starting preparing for the GMAT, the first thing you have to do is see where you stand. And your journey is definitely going to be very different from anyone else's. It's unique to you. So you have to figure it out. How long is it going to take? Because I've had people ask me, how long did it take for you to go from a 600 to 720? I said it took me 6 months. But that's not going to be the same for you. It could, it could be just 2 months for you. But that is something you have to decide, not decide based on someone else's success story or something. So, if I had a chance to do it all again, I think I would go back and sit and think, where am I right now? I know my goal is this, but GMAT is a computer adaptive test. It's going to throw different questions at you. It's not something you're sitting and studying for an engineering exam that you're going to decide, okay, let me study this. It's, you can answer something. It's just very different. I'm not sure if you're getting what I'm saying, but
I do.
GMAT is different. So it is something you have to take it as it goes, set shorter goals instead of a longer goal is what I think for the GMAT is. Yeah.
That's very apt and well put. I can't tell you how many times I have been in the general chat, which is probably 90% of the day anyways. And students ask, how can I get, or can I get a 720 in 1 month? Can I get 750 in 1 month? And the answer is always, it depends. It depends, right. It depends, it depends. And so I'm really glad you brought that up, because a lot of students don't understand that until it's too late. But you brought up something very interesting. You said at the beginning you weren't seeing a great amount of progress.
Yep.
To me means you were really hitting walls early on in your studies. And so I'd really like to, so I'd like to know, when did you start seeing progress? But more importantly, how did you push through that point where you were feeling either anxious or maybe upset about not seeing the progress you were expecting?
Yeah. The funny thing is that when I hit the biggest wall of thinking, I'm going to give up, and I took my mock that day, I said, I'm done with this. I'm just struggling and I'm not getting anywhere. That was the day I scored a 720. And why did that happen? Because I just let it go. I let go of my stress. I had been preparing for a while. I think it was in Feb that I took my first attempt. I got a 600 and I put my heart and soul into my preparation. Because of the lockdown, I got a lot of time to do that, set my goals and start working. And that was what happened. It was the minute I let go of the stress that I think the more you stress, the more you're worrying about your final score. You're not focusing on the question on hand. What question am I looking at? I'm just only worrying about, am I going to get that 700? So that was the day I actually had that breakthrough, Forget about all that. I'm just going to focus on the question I have and do this mock exam. And I scored a 720 in my mock. So I think that worked for me quite well. Letting it go.
That's
letting go.
Awesome. Boy, it's almost like you're quoting something there. That's terrific. It brings up another good point that I was going to touch on later. Stress management, anxiety management, but also at the same time, realizing that you do have to, as you've said, and as the song goes, you have to let it go.
Yes.
You have to be able to center yourself. And given that you did do that, what activities would you recommend people do now that you've been through it? You're on the other side. What would you recommend some of our users do to help manage that stress prior to a test, to help release that stress?
Right. I think meditation worked very well for me because there's this yogic breathing pranayama exercises where you breathe in, through each nostril. So kind of there's the logic behind it that it kind of helps you use both sides of your brain equally, sort of. So I did meditation every day, at least almost every other day. And once you start meditating, I think it is very hard for you to stop because it's kind of cumulative, the benefits. And once you start seeing the benefits, you'll realize how you are able to manage your emotions really well. So meditation was definitely helpful. The second most important thing was exercise. I think exercise is extremely crucial to keep you sharp. I think that was the second thing I did. And third thing is have some other hobby that can reduce your stress. I play the piano. So I think when I was really stressed, I used to just go start playing the piano. So my focus completely went off the GMAT. So these three things kind of helped me. And it's going to be, again, unique to each person.
Terrific. That's really good to know. I'm sure users appreciate it. But given the fact that this test takes up so much of your time, how did you study? What allowed you to study appropriately and still have time to exercise and do a hobby? So I guess what I'm asking is, were you studying in the early mornings? Were you studying at night because you clearly worked? Were you studying under your desk with a flashlight, hoping your boss didn't see you? Were you studying at lunchtime? Help fill that gap in for those who are maybe finding it difficult to time manage appropriately.
Well, I think the COVID situation was a blessing in disguise for me because, we were on lockdown. I was at home. I don't work from home. My job is not remote kind of thing. So that way I had a lot of time. And, I mainly focused on the GMAT that time. And then when work started as well, I kind of kept this as a priority. And for studying in the morning or the evening, I think I'm a morning person, definitely. But when it comes to study, I can even burn the midnight oil. I can do anything. I think it's the drive that gets you to do that. But I prefer studying in the morning because your mind is really fresh. And whatever you study, you can retain it. And through the day, you can kind of review whatever you've studied. And studying at night also, I don't think is very different. But I think, again, it depends on a person. For me, it was studying in the mornings were convenient. And yeah, as I said, because of the lockdown, and I have a routine otherwise as also, even if I'm working, I have a routine where I wake up, do my meditation exercise. That is crucial it's a part of my life. It's not something that I would do just for the GMAT. But those aspects really help me with my GMAT. So I think leading a well-balanced life is crucial even for the GMAT as well as otherwise.
A very good point. So and by the way, I am very schedule-oriented as well. Working into your schedule a little bit, when did you decide to take then your mock exams, your CAT exams? I assume you had a pretty regimented schedule of, well, I'll take probably one every 2 weeks or one every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What was that like? And how many did you take?
I actually took the official mocks. I took my first attempt in Feb. So I think a week before my first attempt, I took a GMAT Prep and I scored 640. So I have no idea why I thought I'm going to score a 700 in my actual exam. But that was kind of a shot in the arm, right? It was like, be realistic. You can't just go and score a 700. You have to do your preparation. So that is when I decided to keep a schedule, as in, it was sort of, I took it as the days went by, I decided to go and focus on my fundamentals. What were the concepts I was weak at? How did I struggle on my actual exam? What happened was a quant, I think it kind of threw me off. There were these concepts I was weak at, and that is where I was struggling in my actual exam. Coordinate geometry, number properties, some concepts that I struggled with, I decided to sit and give it a lot of attention, do a lot of practice problems. That's where GMAT Club Forum also comes in handy, where you can, go and filter out the questions and kind of use those questions to practice. And for verbal, I realized during SC, I was just sitting there. I was like, okay, maybe this answer feels right. Maybe this answer feels right. I always scored above 30 on verbal. So, and I think eventually also I didn't put a lot of preparation, although I think I had to do that. What I noticed that was it's not okay for you to just think on the exam day, maybe this is the answer. That is not right at all. You have to be at least, I know, you have to be at least 99% confident that this is the answer, not just gauge that, okay, maybe. So I knew those were the mistakes I made during my actual exam. So once I started preparing that, I think Target Test Prep really helped me for quant preparation. They kind of have all the chapters and they have chapter-wise tests towards the end. For Manhattan SE, I use for SE, I use Manhattan SE. I highlighted all the important points and I went through the points multiple times until they were at the tip of my fingers. And then I started practicing. I knew that for SE, you have to know why that one answer is right. What are the errors? I mean, is it because of pronoun issues that you're saying that this answer is wrong? You have to have an explanation to yourself, explain to yourself why this answer is right, why the others are wrong. And for CR, I think CR Bible was extremely helpful. They have, they kind of cover all the question types. They give you strategies for each question type. How can you, and they kind of explain the CR structure, everything. So CR Bible was helpful there. This was after my first attempt, actually, that, I kind of focused a lot more on Manhattan SE and practicing and understanding why a question is wrong. That was what my biggest takeaway from my first attempt was. So, and then I started taking my mocks. I think Veritas Prep, I took Veritas Prep I think a couple of tests, maybe 5 to 6 tests once a week. And I noticed that my quant scores varied a lot, but my verbal was very similar to my official mocks. And I think once a week or once a month, kind of, not a set timing, because if I scored something like 650 today, I would take 2 weeks to take another mock. And then in July, I took my GMAT Prep mock. I scored a 720. And then again, I spent another month to practice. I started doing Target Test Prep tests. They have the option to just create tests, but they are not computer adaptive. So, and then I moved to GMAT Club tests. I think they were very helpful because they give you a real gauge of how your actual test is going to be like. It's kind of throws you off, kind of, like you have time later. And GMAT Club tests are really very difficult. So your final exam is going to be very easy if you do well in GMAT Club tests. I was averaging at a 42. So though I was disappointed with the score, I realized it was helping me find my weak areas, because GMAT Club tests have the section where you can do your performance analysis. What are your weakest areas? I noticed that coordinate geometry was kind of popping up all the time. I had to spend a lot of time on coordinate geometry. So I did that, analyze my weak areas from the performance analysis section and start working out a lot of problems in that section until I got comfortable with that concept. So this is how my practice went. And yeah, my actual score was the closest to the official mocks.
Which is good to know. So how many, if you recall, if you don't, that's okay. How many mocks in total did you take?
I think I took about 5 to 6 Veritas and 3 GMAT Prep mocks.
And the GMAT Prep mock was the one you took right before you took your final real GMAT, correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And you said that was fairly close to what you actually scored.
Yes. Yep.
Excellent. Which is exactly the way it should be. Would you recommend users sort of follow that model?
I would, if going back in time, what I would do is I would probably just stick to the official mocks. And because I think everything else you can use for practice, that is great practice, any other mocks. But when it comes to having a good gauge of what your actual score is going to be, it has to be GMAT Prep. That was what worked for me. And I would say, try and take it. If you say you are planning to take your GMAT in 6 months, take GMAT mock once a month and see where you stand. Do your preparation, take another the next month, and how you have improved. because that is going to give you the real figure closest to, I can say, that's what happened to me. So I think that is what I would advise people.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is Veritas, you took 5 or 6 of them, as you've said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were good, but they may not have been as accurate as you wanted them in the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not close to my actual score. Yeah.
Perfect. And that's really good to know and note. Mocks, the only real ones that you should trust are the GMAT preps. So do not burn them. Do not waste them. Make sure to actually use them when you need to.
Well, actually, that's the point. I made sure that I did not use any GMAT prep questions when I was practicing. I only stuck to OG or some other source. So you have to make sure that you don't use up GMAT prep questions during your preparation. Otherwise, you're not going to get an actual figure then if you come across the same questions during your mocks.
Another very good point to make. If you're on the forum, you have a GMAT prep filter, please make sure to avoid it if you're going to use those mocks. Thank you, Lynn, for pointing that out. If I could transition a little bit, Lynn, I would love to sort of get your mindset again towards the beginning of your studies and how you decided where you were going to attack first in terms of quant versus verbal. Were you planning on, because it sounds like you had a quant background, were you planning on making sure quant was nice and strong before going to verbal? Were you planning on starting verbal and then doing quant? What was your thought process there?
Okay, as an Indian engineer, I think 720 is an average score. So
you did very well. Come on.
and I knew that I had to score at least a 49 to even be considered in schools. So, but when I first started preparing, I was around at a 32, and that is when I started doing target test prep, and that helped me cross that 47 mark. But still I was really nervous because, my other mocks were showing me a different score in quant. So I think I put in 80% of my preparation into quant, although I do wish I had spared a little more time in preparing for verbal, but my main focus was quant because of the reasons I mentioned. Because again, even with a 50, I'm at a 86 percentile, whereas for verbal, I got a 38 and I'm at a 85 percentile. So I really wish I'd prepared more for verbal, but my main focus was quant.
Okay. So we're going to dive into this a little bit deeper, but from a broad point of view, it sounds like you really separated your quant and verbal studies, where you really hammered quant and then verbal is almost secondary or tertiary.
Yeah.
Were you studying on different days with your quant and verbal, or was it literally sectioned off where your first couple of months were quant and then you transitioned to verbal thereafter? Okay.
So first I started with theory of both quant and verbal. So I would say if I spent 2 hours with quant, I spent about half an hour with verbal. My plan was always to kind of at least, attempt 20 SC questions a day, 10 CR questions, and at least 1 RC. I didn't stick to the plan religiously, but I tried to do that. And quant, I used to do at least 30 to 40 questions a day. Is it okay if I show a strategy which I think if I could go back in time, I would do that?
Yeah, please.
So I used the same whiteboard that I used for my exam. Luckily, I get to use it.
That's so cool.
Okay. So this is the strategy I would actually use if I had to take the GMAT again. So I would start with, there are 3 aspects. I've divided them into 3 factors. Like the first is the content, right? The content is what the GMAT is testing you on. So you have your topics, fundamentals, core concepts. That is the theory part of the GMAT. And next is going to be the practice where you're going to attempt a lot of questions. So every time you make a mistake, you're going to review, you're going to revise your concepts. You're going to identify your gaps when you're practicing. Okay, maybe you're making too many mistakes in geometry. Go and revise your geometry concepts. What particular concept? And then you're going to identify traps. I'm going to give you an example of the traps I fell for. One was I wasn't reading the question carefully. I was doing it very quickly, read the question quickly, solve it, and take the answer. So that was the first trap. So I realized that I have to read the question carefully. And then before I, mark the answer, I have to spend 2 more seconds to ensure that that is what the question is asking me for. And the second trap was that for me personally, with overlapping sets problems, the question normally combines percentages and numbers. So I always did my calculations with numbers, and the final answer, I always did my calculations using percentages, and then I wanted to convert the final answer to the number. I always forgot this step. And because I forgot, I used to write a hash and circle it out to just, when I started the question, just to remember to do that. And again, I used to forget. So these are the traps I fell for. So I think the practice part of this is going to be to identify all that. And the third part is the mocks. So mocks are going to help you understand how you manage your stress, your emotions, and how are you going to time yourself. And this is what is going to give you the strategy. I think strategy is going to come under both practice and mocks. So I think you come up with your strategies based on how you are performing. So I think these are the three things I would advise anyone to do. First of all, start with your fundamentals, learn your theory well, start practicing questions. When you practice, the mistakes you make are going to actually give you an idea of where you're going wrong. Why are you going wrong? And I think I would advise you to write kind of the reasons why you're going wrong. Are you falling for a trap answer? Are you reading it quickly? What is it? I mean, you will know why. So identify why you are making mistakes. And third is, when you practice mocks, make sure you are taking it in a kind of a real test environment, sort of, take it without breaks. Because online GMAT, you don't have a break between your quant and verbal. So kind of practice that and come up with your strategy. Because every time I studied each section, I came up with my different strategies for each section. So that's kind of the strategy I would put together if I had to start studying for GMAT today.
Wow. It sounds like you gave that an incredible amount of thought, and kudos to you for doing that self-reflection. I know a lot of students, some moderators, some non-moderators, once they achieved their score, popped the champagne cork and said goodbye forever.
I did that.
but then to reflect there further, that is incredibly that's amazing. And maybe you did it for this chat. If you did, I really appreciate it, because that was a fantastic breakdown of how students should really approach it. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'd like to get a little more granular now. We did the sort of broad perspective. I'd like to dive into specifically your quant prep and your verbal prep.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, sure.
So the first thing I'd like to know, we know you got a 720. What was your quant split on that?
I got a 15 quant and I got a 38 in verbal. My first attempt, I got a 14 quant and 31 in verbal.
And that was your first CAT mock, correct?
No, that was my first attempt, GMAT attempt. I took my first GMAT attempt in Feb, and my second attempt was on September 1st.
So you clearly saw a decent amount of improvement.
Yes.
I know for quant, you've mentioned that TTP really helped you. I assume you would recommend them for students who are...
Definitely. I think, you see, I can go back to an example during my engineering to give you an idea of what I would like to say. During my engineering, I had a very tough subject called thermodynamics. And I think any mechanical engineer would know what thermodynamics is. It can drive you nuts. And I went to the library. I brought these fat books, placed them in front of me. I put in so much effort, but I flunked my exam. And I had never put so much hard work or effort into anything in my life as much as I did there. So that I learned one big lesson in my life, that hard work is not enough. You need to put your hard work in the right direction. Just, working hard, slogging is not the answer. You have to have some sort of a guidance. And that is where TTP helped me. They have structured the course really well. They explain all the concepts, and all the concepts are so simplified. They kind of, like, for example, probability, they split down each concept, make it very simple. And then what is a 700 level question is, you just put together those simple concepts and you can solve a complex problem. So they simplified it so well. And I think I was really impressed with that course. And then they give you, so if they start with theory concepts, you learn the theory really well, and then they have chapter wise tests based on the difficulty level. They have simple tests, medium tests, hard tests. So you kind of start solving the simple tests. You kind of have to reach an accuracy of 90% before you move to the medium test. So you're ensuring that your concepts are sound. And yeah, I think that was TTP worked really well for me. For quant, it like I said, it kind of helped me go from a 32 to around 47 plus. So if you do the course really well, I can tell you can definitely cross a 49 with TTP for quant.
That's good to know. And for the record, once more, Lynn is not being compensated by anyone or anything for the comments she is making here. They are 100% unsolicited, except me asking them. And they should be taken at face value. So that is really good to know that you highly recommend TTP. Using TTP in our forum, how did you keep track of your errors? Were you using our error log? Were you taking notes? Were you using an Excel to keep track of that? What was that process like for you?
Error log. See, when I started taking GMAT club tests, my best way to do an error log was to just go back to the tests I had taken and start solving the questions again. I mean, mentally, I didn't really have to solve each and every question because I was taking a lot of tests. I was taking one test every day, at least one test every day, so more than one test. I went back to those tests. I used to mentally look at the question. Do I know the concept? Do I know how to solve it? Go to the next question, continue doing that. And I used to go and review each test repeatedly until I was really sure of how I was getting on. And I realized that initially I was like, GMAT club tests are so hard. I mean, why am I putting myself through this? And then I took a GMAT mock and I realized I got stuck at a question which was so similar to a GMAT club test question. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I better get on with this. I have to do the GMAT club test questions. And that was my error log for quant, actually, using GMAT club tests. And then I started making notes at the back of my notebook. Mm-hmm. Why am I making these mistakes? Read the question carefully. And I used to read that again every day before I started attempting tests. And then the second point was, okay, you're making this mistake. Be careful about this. I used to make notes for myself. So yeah, my error log was GMAT club tests. I'm not very good at maintaining an Excel or something. So it was my notebook because it was easily accessible. And somehow that was what I did for error logs. Yeah.
Okay. But it worked for you. As we've talked about before, you have to do what works best for you.
Exactly. You have to find your thing.
Yes. All right. So, and I think we talked about this a little bit, but how many quant questions did you practice per day when you were going through your studies?
Yeah, at least 30. I think towards the end, I think 1 week before my exam, I knew that I wasn't taking any more GMAT Prep mocks. So I started solving as many GMAT Prep questions as possible. That really helped me in my actual exam. I used to do, maybe I went on to do more than 150 to 200 questions a day the week before my exam. That is how I picked those questions. I went to GMAT Club performance analysis. I saw what were the topics I was weakest at. I picked that topic first. I did many GMAT Prep questions, maybe 20 questions. Go to the next topic, do 20 questions and review. I think reviewing is what is time consuming here. Through your entire preparation, reviewing a question is time consuming. You have to spend that time. If I'm doing a question in 1 minute, the review could take more than 15 minutes. You have to have the patience to do that. I think most of us tend to skip that part, but that is what is actually more important. So GMAT Prep, I think, yeah, even on the test day, I think I did at least 50 quant questions before I could go ahead. Only easy questions before I could sit for my tests, just to put myself in the flow. So yeah, at least 200 questions the week before my test. Otherwise, at least 30 questions a day.
Wow. And so I'll want to ask about that test day experience a little later on.
Yeah.
Did you stick to exclusively OG and GMAT Prep, so the official questions, or did you mix in others like Veritas, MGMAT, Magoosh, questions like that?
I always believed that the OG questions were the best. So I stuck to the OG questions. And the last week of my prep, I started with GMAT Prep. So especially for verbal, I kind of stuck to OG. And yeah, otherwise, other than that, it was the GMAT club test questions. Otherwise, I didn't deviate from OG at all.
Okay, very good to know. And also, if you can pull it off, highly recommended. Nothing beats official. Moving on to verbal. So you said you scored a V38, correct?
Yeah.
And you said Power Score CR Bible, and you mentioned MGMAT's sentence correction book. I didn't hear my reading comprehension or critical reasoning guide. I won't take that personally. I really won't, I promise. But so I assume you would recommend those two sources for critical reasoning and sentence correction. What would you maybe recommend somebody for reading comp to help round out that process?
Yeah, before I get to that, Evan, I think if you had mentioned about your CR notes, I would have probably crossed a 45 mark in verbal. Now I have someone to blame for me not getting a good score in verbal.
I'm
why don't
happy
you
to
tell the
bear
viewers
that
about
burden.
your notes?
I'm okay to carry that burden. I really am. Blame me. When you're applying to B schools, say, you know what, I would have had a 740, but Evan didn't let me know. Blame him.
Tell me about it. I know. I need an official letter from you for that. All right.
I'd be happy to pen something.
Okay. So about RC, I had a study buddy who attempted one RC a day, and I was struggling to do that. So what I did was I requested him, hey, whenever you do that RC, can you please send me the question as well? So when he started sending me these questions, I noticed he was sending me LSAT really dense 700 level questions. So I started attempting those. And what I noticed about RC was that initially it was the topic that I hated the most. And once I figured it out, I think I started really enjoying, I started enjoying doing RCs. So, you know, the thing about RC I realized was there was this one particular RC question I was solving. It was something to do with some revolution, and it had 10 questions. When I reached the 10th question, I had solved the first 9 questions. I reached the 10th question. I realized the scope of the passage was a time period between 1880 to 1930. And I hadn't figured this until the last question. And the scope of the passage is so important. You know, the topic, the scope, and the purpose of the passage, they are so crucial to understand before you start the first question. And when I realized I had not understood the scope until I got to the 10th question, I wondered, how can I figure out the scope? Now, for the viewers who don't really know the difference about between topic and scope, going to give you an example. Like, say, for example, the topic is marine life. The scope can be about, you know, maybe the coral reef. So that is the scope, the whole overall topic, and there's the scope. And the questions are going to kind of be directed at the scope because, see, one of the wrong answers is out of scope questions, right? So understanding the scope is crucial. And I realized that when I took maybe read the first 3 to 4 lines of the passage more than 2 to 3 times, I got a hang of what the passage was talking about, and then I read the rest of the passage and understood what the passage was. So that worked for me. That was one of my strategies for RC. And I had to make sure that I didn't panic that I was spending so much time reading the passage, because I knew if I spend that extra few seconds reading the first 2 to 3 lines repeatedly, I will be saving that time during the questions. So that is one thing I came up with. The other thing, while practice, I noticed that if a question is asking about the second paragraph, sometimes I found the answer in the 4th paragraph. So I'm not sure if someone else has come across this, but that is what I figured. And I realized that if a question is pointing at the second paragraph, make sure you have an understanding of the passage, and then you'll remember that, hey, I also read something else here. So kind of, you know, be very careful, read the question carefully for RC. And the more you practice with difficult passages, such as the LSAT 700 level passages, your GMAT passages are going to look really silly. Trust me on that. So when I started doing the GMAT passages, they were very easy to read, very easy to understand. easy to attempt. So once you practice something tough, over preparation is always good to kind of get to the score if you're kind of getting it. I'm sorry. If you want to score 700, prepare for 800. And it's like, what is that saying? Shooting for the stars, you have.
If you shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon if you miss.
Right, something like that. So that's what I'm saying is, over preparation is never bad. So kind of practice tough passages. The other thing that worked for RC is that start reading a lot, read different topics, anything that is not something you are comfortable reading with. And I think that is going to kind of give you that push to not be in a shock when you come across a very difficult RC passage. Yeah.
That is all really, really helpful stuff. And you are just making me so happy because I preach and preach and preach to students to do the LSAT, do it for critical reasoning and do it for reading comp.
Right.
Because it's so much more challenging.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So that makes me really happy to hear. Staying on verbal just a little bit longer, how many questions did you do a day on verbal, and did you mix them in with quant, or was it verbal one day, quant another?
No, I never skipped quant any day, and I kind of stuck to verbal and quant together. But yeah, they were like, I don't think I did it definitely. If I felt like I was doing too much of quant, I would take a break, go and do SC, and then go back to quant, do CR. It was, I took it as the day went, what I felt. So I just, it depends. It was, no hard and fast rule that I followed for that. But I had this minimum set of questions I wanted to follow, and I tried to do at least one RC a day. And I spent at least an hour to do one RC, so I knew exactly review and understand why I was getting confused between two options, which happened quite a lot before. Even in my first attempt, I was getting stuck between two answers. So why was that happening? How can I cut that down? So I spent 1 hour on RC, and then it was a mix and match sort of a thing.
Okay, that's really good to know. Folks, for those of you who are wondering how Lynn was able to score above a 700, it's that level of commitment right there, taking an hour to do one reading comprehension. That is a level of breakdown and review you should be doing for not only every single reading comprehension paragraph and section, but every critical reasoning and sentence correction problem and quant too. You need to know them inside and out, otherwise you're going to repeat those mistakes.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. I wish I could hit a kudos button on here. I would have given you 50 to this point. But unfortunately, it's not the case. But you worked so hard, and you definitely deserve that score. So I'm really happy to hear that. Transitioning a little bit to IR and AWA. This is a fun one. I know we've discussed you use Chinese burned AWA, how to get a perfect score. Every admin and moderator and expert will point you in that direction. And Naren, if you could post the link, that would be really helpful. For IR, how much time would you say you spent prepping for that? Would you say you maybe spent a day or two, or was it really not on your radar?
I wish I had spent more time actually on IR. In my first attempt, I scored a 5, and in my second, I scored even less, which I'm really ashamed to even talk about. But the point is, I think you should spend time there, because every time I took a mock, I kind of skipped the IR section. But eventually, I think 2 to 3 days before the test, I prepared, which was not enough. So I'm definitely going to say, please don't follow what I did. Go ahead and do at least one IR every day if possible, which I wanted to, but I just didn't do it. And that was a mistake I made. Don't make that mistake. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the famous saying is, a 720 is a 720. That's the thing that matters. IR is really a secondary thing, and AWA is pretty much tertiary. I mean, you did the important thing well, and you excelled in it. You got an elite score, and that's all that matters.
Well, actually, I did use the Chinese burner template, and I scored a 5. And I just spent, I think, because the second attempt was online GMAT. The first attempt was at a center, so I had to take the AWA, and I got a 5. and I'd just gone through the template the previous day, I would definitely recommend anyone taking the exam at the center to go through that template. It's very helpful.
And I'm hoping one of our admins will post that. If not, I will make sure to post it for the next week in the general chat, again, which I spend all day in anyways. By the way, don't break a rule in the general chat. Otherwise, I come down on you pretty hard. Most people understand that. Sorry, I need to get that in there. So we're on the home stretch. So now we're going to talk about the week coming up to your test. And then, by the way, once we wrap up this sort of the last talking points, the test day experience and the test week, we're going to jump to your questions. So Naren, please be ready on that. My first question is, did you take it online or did you take it in person?
My first attempt was at the center and the second attempt was online.
And online was your better score. So how do you think that affected your experience?
Actually, my attempt at the center was not a pleasant experience. First of all, my exam started half an hour after it was scheduled to start. And then when I took my first break after my verbal section, and when I got back after my break, my system did not log in for half an hour. So it was a really bad experience for me at the center. So when I decided to take the online GMAT, I'd heard a lot of stories about the proctor not turning up and people had to reschedule their exams and stuff like that. So I was prepared for any untoward incident to happen on the day. And I had heard about power cuts. So I made sure that I didn't face any such issue that were in my control. And on the test day, I was not too well, but I decided to go ahead and give the test. And because I was taking it at home, I didn't have to travel anywhere. My test started on time, and the funny thing that happened when I started quant was the first two questions, the proctor kept chatting and the screen, my question was covered and I was getting really annoyed. I was getting so annoyed. Because even if he was just typing, it was just covering my whole screen. I couldn't see the question and my timer is running. And he was asking me to actually show my whiteboard. And I think by the time I showed him my whiteboard and I quickly continued working it out, I was not able to read the question. And I realized he continued chatting to ask me to show the backside of my whiteboard. And that was really so annoying. That was not in my control, but anyway, I got a 50. One thing I would like to note here, this was my fault, was when I finished quant, I still had 3 minutes left, and the last question was very difficult. And I decided to spend that extra 3 minutes on the question, even though I wasn't sure if I could attempt it. I thought, let me give myself that time before verbal. And before I realized, the timer ran out, and I was so disappointed. I thought, I assumed that I'm going to be penalized so badly. I've ruined my exam, and I think I had to skip my first two verbal questions just to compose myself, because that was disastrous, right? I'd heard that you're going to go 50 points down. And I'm like, what's the point of taking this test now? I've done this, and I'm like, it's okay, relax, it's fine. What's done is done. Just focus on what you have in front of you. And it turns out that if you've already marked your answer, they actually automatically take the answers what I read on GMAT Club. I don't know if it's true, but I do think it's true because I scored a 50 on quant. So
congratulations.
So my advice is, if you're on your last question, make sure you have ticked an answer, even if you don't know the answer, just in case your timer runs out, you don't have to go through this stress. And verbal went on. I stressed myself out a bit during verbal and I was not able to focus. I think I had to let go of the first two questions, and there was one RC question where I got stuck with one question. I had to let that go as well. Otherwise, it went on kind of smoothly, and it is tiresome to sit for 2 hours at a stretch. You have to practice that. Otherwise, and for me, taking the test at the test center, you are supposed to, I wear spectacles. So if you're wearing a mask, you're going to be fogging up your specs, and you have to keep wiping your specs every now and then. That's the kind of review I read about taking at the center. So you have to see what works for you. Are you going to have power cuts? Can you manage that? And, what if the proctor doesn't turn up? Are you okay to reschedule your exam? You have to think about all that before you decide what option to go with. Yep.
That's good to know. So again, it sounds like being prepared, which, as
Yeah.
most of you on the forum know, my symbol is the Boy Scout fleur de lis, and the motto is "Be prepared." So that's music to my ears. You said you were dealing with a bit of stress. How did you manage that on test day?
Um,
How, or
it,
during the sections, I should say. So during verbal in particular, you said
yeah.
you were stressed. How'd you handle that?
Yes, one was I started taking deep breaths and stopped worrying about what had happened. It is difficult. I mean, no matter how prepared you are when you're put on the spot, I think the thing is when you're trying to doing meditation, your recovery time is sooner than when you don't do all that. I'm not going to say you're not going to be stressed, you're going to be relaxed and you're going to be calm and go through the exam. What I'm trying to say is when you practice, you are going to recover quickly. So when I try to compose myself, it was quicker than had I not done all that I did. So I tried to focus on what I had, the question, try to focus on the question. I just kept repeating it to myself until it actually started happening. So that's how I kind of managed there. Yep.
Excellent. It's a great way to go about it. So I have two more questions, then we'll dive into the ones that have been left on YouTube. The first is, given you scored a 50 on quant and a 30 on verbal, you were experiencing a decent amount of 700 level questions. Did you know you were experiencing them? And if so, how did you sort of fight with yourself not to either get too worked up or to overthink it? Because contrary to popular belief, the GMAT is a very psychological test and you're battling yourself constantly.
Well, uh, during my contest section, I didn't think too much. I think when you're doing your calculations, mental calculations, you don't have to think about anything else. You're just focusing on quant. That's the best thing about quant. Your stress is gone off because you're so busy calculating something. So it was not a problem at all. There were two questions, however, which I didn't know what they were testing on at all. And I tried to work on them for 2 minutes and then I gave up. But that was okay. There were just two questions and I didn't worry too much because quant kept me focused. But when it came to verbal, I really didn't know the level of questions I was getting because focusing is very hard when it comes to verbal for me personally. And uh, as I said, one RC question I had to give up because I couldn't decide between two options for that one particular question throughout the whole section. And my final RC was very easy. So I had assumed that I didn't do very well in verbal at all because of the stress and everything else. So it was a pleasant surprise that I scored 38. But I think, it was okay. I didn't really focus so much on the end result at that point of time, just focused on the question I had. Yeah.
Okay, it's good. You didn't overthink it. And that's good advice for everyone. Don't overthink the question. Lastly, again, last question for you. What are your future plans like? You have this great score. You have all this work experience. What does the future hold for Lynn?
Again, it's an average score for me.
Come
For
on.
the kind of, I represent a very broad candidate pool, so it is a decent score. That was the score I wanted, to be honest. So I can't really brag about it, maybe. But yes, I'm very grateful for that score, and I do plan to apply to B schools and see how it goes, and yet to make some decisions also.
Excellent. Well, in that case, I am all out of questions. I'm hoping Naren or BB or Workout, one of the other admins is still monitoring here, so they can throw up some of the questions that YouTubers have asked, because I'm in a relatively precarious situation where I don't think I can highlight them. So if one of you are on, I ask you to please help me out here and highlight them. So that way we can wrap this session up. Let's wait a minute to see if that actually happens or not.
Sure.
While we're waiting potentially for them to highlight questions, and hopefully they will. If not, I'll figure out some way to get around that. Do you have any last comments that you'd want to make to people that we didn't talk about, that we didn't hit on, that you feel would be is very important that everybody should know?
Okay. I think GMAT is achievable. I mean, a great score is definitely achievable to anyone planning to take it. It's all about your strategy. How are you going to strategize? If you need guidance, reach out to the right people. There are plenty of courses in the market, and each course gives you a trial period. So check out the trial, see if the course suits you. Don't go by, thousands of reviews, 5-star reviews. Maybe that course will suit you or it won't. It's something, you are the best judge of that. And take that guidance, whatever guidance you can get. GMAT Club is a great forum. You can go and ask the many experts on the forum for some guidance. And it is definitely possible to get a 700 plus. So don't give up and just keep working on yourself. Don't stress, because the more you stress, the more anxious you are. I think the worse it's going to get. So try and, maintain that and be confident. And the one thing that I had this mantra, which I repeated to myself the previous day and on the test day, that GMAT is just another exam. I've taken so many exams. This is just another exam. It's not a big deal. I just kept repeating that to myself, and that really helped me. So just figure what works for you, what will help you. It's a mental game at the end of the day. It's all in your head, because even on the test day, I was not well. I just made myself mentally strong to sit there and take the test. So at the end of the day, make sure that you can keep yourself mentally strong and do it. And you can definitely do it.
Awesome. That's good to know. So I just checked. It looks like in terms of the admin team, I'm on my own for this one. I love those guys. What I can try and do is I've been reading some of the questions as they've come in. Most of them have been talked about above. So if anyone came in late, this session will be posted on YouTube. It will be recorded. So you'll be able to view it in its entirety, and you'll be able to post questions after it as well. And somebody from GMAT Club should be able to answer. But really fast, it looks like somebody asked, in hindsight, to prep for the exam, and in hindsight, would you want to take more time to prep for the exam? So you got 720. You've said that's somewhat of an average score for you. Would you want to push maybe a little further, a couple months, and maybe push for that 740 or 750, or is that not really something that you want to do or feel would be beneficial to your application?
I think a 720 is a decent score for me at the moment. And if a school requires me to take it again, I would. Otherwise, I don't have any plans of taking it again, because I know that people can get into the schools that I'm looking at with a 700, and people who even have a 750 get rejected. So I think GMAT is just one aspect of your entire profile. And I think 720 is good to go for me with the schools that I'm aiming at. So it depends on the schools you are looking at.
That's very good to note. And to your point, the GMAT is just a fraction. Your story is what matters more. If you could have an 800, if you're the most boring applicant in the world, you're not getting into Harvard. You're not getting into Columbia, MIT. I mean, you'd be lucky to get into a B school. The fact remains once more that it really is a holistic process, and that you should never let your score, no matter what it is, hold you back.
Sure.
In that case, it looks like I think we answered all questions. So I'm going to wrap this session up. Thank you, everybody who viewed and who attended. Lynn, in particular, thank you so much. We at GMAT Club really appreciate it, and we'll make sure to show our appreciation in some way, shape, or form after this is over. So to the rest of you folks, one question. Which schools are you targeting?
I have a few European schools in mind, and let's keep it at that.
Okay. In that case, as I was saying moments ago, we will conclude. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We hope you have a great weekend, and hope to see you on the forum. Make sure to reach out. Granted, I may be a mean person when it comes to reprimanding people, but I swear I'm a nice person. But have a good weekend, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Bye.